Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here. So, yeah, I don't have a potential conflict of interest to declare, but I will say that I've been involved in 2 randomised controlled trials where we've now unblinded the data and seen that last week, but I'm not in a position to disclose the results. So I've already dampened down any enthusiasm for this talk and the main point. So there we are. But the data will be presented at the union meeting in November. So Ben has already highlighted the global burden, and we know now that more and more with the rollout of expert, there is greater detection of bacteriologically resistant, confirmed bacteriologically resistant TB, and the majority are MDR or rifampicin resistant TB, but there is emerging resistance to second-line drugs, particularly to the fluoroquinolones. And so about 7% of TB notifications are drug resistant, and the prevalence of drug resistance is higher in those who have previously been treated for TB, but certainly is also around 3%, 2 to 3% in those with new TB cases. And as Ben said, wherever it's common, and it's certainly common in the Asia-Pacific region, wherever it's common in adults, it'll be common in children. So a lot of this talk is on, this is on MDR TB, but a lot of the points are really very similar to the points that we discuss when we talk about TB preventive therapy for drug-susceptible TB as well. And one of the major challenges is the prevention gap. We actually don't do very well, even though for a long, long time we'd known that young children in a household with TB are particularly at-risk group, and that they should receive preventive treatment when eligible. We know that there's a huge gap in the implementation of that. In fact, the coverage is far lower than it is for people living with HIV. And only recently has the preventive therapy guidelines from WHO included TPT for HIV uninfected older child and adolescent contacts, but we really haven't even got off first base for that group. And yet just this week in Lancet Global Health, the modelers published a paper suggesting that if we could scale up, we could prevent 1 million deaths by 2035, and this would be cost effective. As for TPT for child and adolescent contacts of MDR TB, that's been extremely limited in its application. There's recent policy updates, and I just wanted to touch on the fact that certainly some of this relates to the management of MDR TB in children. Remember, when we do contact screening, we're not just about doing preventive treatment. Contact screening has 2 main roles. First, it is to do active case finding in households. So first you want to find any contacts who actually have active disease and treat them. And then you can consider who's eligible for TPT and then treat those as well. So relevant to contact screening and management is the fact that more and more expert ultra for diagnosis on a range of samples is being recommended and used. But as Ben highlighted, there's no need now to use injectables for children. We can use all oral shorter regimens, including the use of bedaquiline and delaminid for all ages. But importantly, in the updated recommendations, and this relates to all TB, has the recommendation for decentralised and integrated models of care for detect, treatment and prevention. As Ben said earlier, the management of TB in many settings is still very, very centralised to large tertiary settings, particularly for child TB. So there's no reason to think that MDR TB is any less infectious. In fact, the duration of exposure may actually be a little bit longer if there's delays in diagnosing it, that the person actually has drug-resistant TB. And these are just some data, some from Vietnam, which showed that the proportion of skin test positive in households of MDR patients was higher than it was for other TB patients. And there's some unpublished data there of skin testing by age groups in people in Daru Island, Papua New Guinea, just north of on the Torres Strait, just north of Queensland. And you can see that in households where there's a drug-susceptible TB case, the prevalence of TST positive was 36% and increasing quickly with age, and was higher in those households where you had drug-resistant TB. This is a setting where 20% of all TB is actually drug-resistant TB. I think we can make the same assumptions about risks of disease once infected. The fact that it relates to age. Young age is particularly a high risk factor for developing disease following infection. And that increases again in adolescence. And that's a risk factor for disease, but also a risk factor for severe disease, particularly if they haven't had a BCG. That's from data from the pre-chemotherapy era that Ben reviewed some time back. There's been a more recent analysis of individual participant data, meta-analysis done by Leo Martinez, which finds really the same thing, a 20% risk of disease for the children under 5 who are infected. And you can see what's important there is just showing that with those survival curves that most of the children who develop disease will do so within 3 months following infection. So I think that's an important thing to remember in terms of contact screening and management. It is rather an urgent thing to do to get to those children before they develop disease for preventive treatment. And this just shows that what I've been saying is that the prevalence of infection and the prevalence of disease compared to other groups is high in contacts of drug-resistant TB. So, in terms of the management, there's no current specific recommendation for preventive treatment, but we know, as I've said, that young child contacts of drug-resistant TB cases are high risk. And we have observational studies that suggest that preventive therapy regimen that is determined by the drug susceptibility of the index case is effective. But what's advised is an individualised approach where we consider risk versus benefit and the drug-resistant test results of the index case. And importantly, I think it's important to recognise that the potential of prevention for drug-resistant TB in terms of the individual, to the family, and to the health system's costs, though they may be changing as the treatment of drug-resistant TB becomes shorter and perhaps less expensive, the potential of savings is really quite substantial. But most drug-resistant TB in children and adolescents is managed at a very centralised setting, and this is a challenge. So this is a summary of the data from the observational evidence, where people treated contacts with of drug-resistant TB and observed and followed them up using a range of different regimens, most of them fluoroquinolone-based. One example is the response to the MDR TB outbreak in Micronesia, where there was a use of 12 months of levofloxacin. There's work there from the groups in Tygerberg at Desmond Tutu in South Africa in young children using combinations that include, for example, ofloxacin and ethambutol, high-dose isoniazid. It's just data from observational evidence, but comparing to those who were not given any treatment, it did seem to impact in that there was a reduction in the numbers at follow-up who developed TB by using these various regimens. So that's the observational evidence. Now, currently the recommendations are fairly vague, and we're hoping that with the dissemination of the findings from these studies by the end of this year, WHO will be reviewing the recommendations for the management of MDR TB contacts. But at the moment, it's absence of any symptoms, the absence of abnormal chest X-ray findings may be used to rule out TB disease among HIV negative household contacts aged more than 5 years and older before preventive treatment. For children under 5, it's really just the absence of symptoms is sufficient to consider preventive treatment. An X-ray is not generally necessary in children under 5 for the use of preventive treatment. It's just whether that they're asymptomatic. If they're symptomatic, they need further investigation. So these are the studies that have been recently completed. The VQuIN study, which is largely in adults in Vietnam, comparing levofloxacin to placebo for 6 months. And then the TB CHAMP study, which was undertaken in South Africa and is now completed, and also comparing levofloxacin to placebo, and mainly in young children under 5 exposed, a few older children and adolescents, with long follow-up. And I can say that the retention to follow-up in the VQuIN study has been very, very high, up over 95%, and also very good retention to follow-up to completion in the TB CHAMP as well. And as I said, the findings from these studies will be presented later this year. And I think I can say as well that what we perhaps already knew was that the safety profile for levofloxacin is excellent. So Ben's highlighted this. For young children, the improvement now in access to child-friendly dispersible formulations for second-line drugs is also really important. Now, the other study that's ongoing is hoping to recruit over 3,000 young children and older children who have evidence of infection, is the Phoenix study, which is a multi-country study, which is really only just getting started, and that's comparing delaminid to isoniazid. And the primary outcome is as for the TB CHAMP study, confirmed or clinical TB, and that's ongoing. I only put this there because I think it's interesting in the Phoenix study that they're comparing to isoniazid. There is some evidence from a study published from Peru that suggests that there may be actually some benefit for isoniazid even ongoing in those who have multi-drug resistant TB. It is biologically plausible that though a drug is not as useful when there's in vitro resistance for the treatment of multibacillary disease, it may have an impact still when it's used for prevention. So just to finish, I think it's important to recognise that we need to remember that access to preventive treatment is a major problem. There are major gaps, and the whole concept of decentralisation integration, the rationale behind that leads to earlier detection. It can improve treatment support and improved outcomes, reduces unnecessary referrals and therefore costs for families. And there is now more and more work being done to show in TB and in contact screening and management that rolling this out will lead to improved uptake of TPT and improved completion and improved case detection. So I think I might just finish there, and just to highlight, the study's not yet published, but I think it shows what we might anticipate. It was a cluster randomised trial, really just where the primary outcome comparing a facility-based or passive approach to contact screening and management versus a community-based and active approach to household-based community approach in Cameroon and Uganda. And this study showed that TPT initiation and completion was better in the intervention arm that was providing care at the community level. Sorry, this didn't come out well, but I think for me the main messages are that there's major gaps in detection, treatment and prevention. The risks for infection and disease are not dissimilar to contacts of drug-susceptible index cases. 6 months of levofloxacin is the current preferred regimen for MDR contacts. And when we consider the risk, we know it has an excellent safety profile. When we consider the benefit, there is observational evidence, but I think we'll soon have some higher quality evidence from randomised placebo-controlled trials. And there is no TPT recommendations as yet for fluoroquinolone resistance index cases, though there is the study, the Phoenix study, which is evaluating delaminid. And implementation challenges really are key in terms of coverage for contact screening and TB preventive treatment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.